prioritize me over your mother. Get to the family gathering now.
His angry voice echoed through the quiet funeral hall. Everyone looked at me in surprise. Please, John, just let me say my final goodbye to my mother.
No, get here now. If you're not here in an hour, I'll divorce you.
Divorce is something I would welcome. However, I didn't want to worry my father, who is already grieving the loss of his wife.
You hear me? 1 hour.
Wait, hold on. The call abruptly ended. As I held my head in frustration, my father spoke up.
What was that?
His body was trembling.
Has he always treated you like this?
Well,
Yes, Dad always acts high and mighty towards Mom.
Emma spoke up for me. Hearing this, my father's expression turned from anger to a stony calm.
I see. Then, let's give him what he wants.
He said that coldly. My name is Laura, and I'm a 48-year-old homemaker. Right now, I live with my husband, John, just the two of us. I met John back when we were students.
Hey, I like you, Laura. Will you go out with me?
He confessed his feelings to me when we were high school classmates, and that's when we started dating. We continued our relationship through college, and when we became working adults, we decided to get married.
I'll cherish you forever, Laura. So, will you marry me?
John proposed to me like that. Then, at his urging, I decided to become a homemaker instead of getting a job. Fortunately, I love doing housework and don't have any particular hobbies, so I don't spend much money. John always looked satisfied with that.
Laura, you're really the ideal wife.
Just hearing that made me very happy. Soon after, I got pregnant with our daughter, Emma. Both John and I, as well as our parents, were overjoyed.
Mom, let me help.
My daughter, Emma, grew up to be a kind child who would follow me around, trying to help. Gradually, her kindness extended beyond me to others as well. If she saw someone in trouble, she would actively offer help. She had a strong sense of justice too, often confronting bullies head-on and coming home covered in dirt. You were really a tomboy back then.
I kind of remember. Sorry for causing so much trouble.
My proud daughter, Emma, grew up and left home when she got married. Since then, it's just been John and me. One day, while I was cleaning as usual, the intercom rang. Oh my God, here we go again. I checked the monitor and, as expected, it was John's mother, Mary. I sighed as I opened the front door.
How long does it take to open the door? You're really slow.
Mary complained as soon as the door opened and walked in. She marched into the living room, turned on the TV, and asked for coffee. I sighed again at the sight. I've always been troubled by Mary's unannounced visits.
You're still bad at cleaning and doing laundry. You're really a useless daughter-in-law.
And she always complains about my housekeeping. This has been going on for years. Mary dotes on John and sees me, her daughter-in-law, as an enemy. That's why she constantly criticizes me.
Maybe it's because you can only give birth to daughters.
Mary is also not happy that I've only had Emma.
It's really a disgrace not to have a male heir.
Even though there's nothing specific to inherit, Mary uses this to berate me. I suffer from secondary infertility. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't have another child. Mary nags about this constantly. I always listen to her snide remarks in silence. I used to argue back.
Shut up. Just listen to me.
But she'd just yell and throw things at me, so I started keeping quiet. Honestly, I don't want to let her into the house. However, if I don't, she rings the intercom repeatedly and starts shouting. In the end, I feel bad for the neighbors and let her in.
You married into this family. You have to obey us.
Then Mary stays for hours before finally leaving. She's finally gone. I sigh with relief, only to make eye contact with a neighbor through the front door.
Isn't that John's mother? Are you okay?
Oh yes, I'm fine. I'm sorry for the noise.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Kind neighbors sometimes listen to my complaints or visit when Mary is here to help me out. Mary cares about appearances, so she doesn't harass me when others are around.
If you need anything, just let me know. Your granddad helped me a lot.
This house is built on land that belonged to my grandfather, and my father built the house.
If you make a copy of the key without permission, I'll kick you out.
The house is in my father's name, and he made it clear to John that his parents can't have a key. With the support of my neighbors and parents, I managed to maintain some peace of mind. I really wish John would take my side. Mary came over again.
So what?
I wish she'd tell us before she comes, and she always complains about my housekeeping. Can you please tell her to stop? John made a face. Here we go again.
Why? Mom's doing it for you. If you can't get along, it's because you're not trying hard enough. Just get used to it.
John never takes my side. Being doted on by Mary, John has some outdated ideas. He believes that as the husband, he and his family come first, and he shouldn't do any housework or childcare. He has this old-fashioned, male chauvinist mindset.
Anyway, it's all your fault. Don't drag me into your problems.
John doesn't really listen to me. Seeing him storm off to his room, I sighed again.
Hey, Mom. Can I come over sometime?
One day, I got a call from Emma. Of course. The next day, Emma came over. Why did you come over on a weekday? Your dad's not here.
I didn't come to see Dad. I came to see you.
Emma isn't very close to John. On the other hand, John dotes on Emma, but she always seems annoyed by it.
Because it was you who really paid attention to me. Besides, I can't like people who bully my favorite mom.
Emma has always cared about me. So what brings you here today?
Mom, have you thought about divorcing Dad?
I froze at Emma's words. Seeing my reaction, Emma started to speak with a wry smile.
You don't talk about yourself because you don't want to trouble Grandpa and Grandma, right?
That was true. At first, I thought about consulting my parents. However, my mother has a chronic illness and has been in and out of the hospital for years. So I hesitated to bring it up with them.
Now both my husband and I are earning enough, and we can support you. So why don't you get a divorce from Dad and live together?
Her words made me pause and think. Certainly, there was Mary, who enjoyed tormenting me, and her husband, Kevin, who acted like he didn't notice. And then there was John, who never helped me, and whom I had finally stopped loving. I wanted to be free from them. Are you sure? Won't it be a burden for you?
It'll be totally fine. Let's live together.
Emma said with a smile. Her words made me feel relieved. However, I knew I couldn't get a divorce right away. I decided to take my time and prepare for it. But those plans were suddenly disrupted. What? Mom is hospitalized? My mother had to be hospitalized again. This time, it seemed quite serious. Hearing my father's distressed voice, I pleaded with John. I want to go to my parents' house.
What? No way. If you go back home, who's going to do the housework?
But this time it might be really serious.
No. You're my wife now, so cut ties with your family.
John was adamantly against me going back to my parents' house. Since getting married, I could only visit my parents once a year. And that was only because Emma begged to go see my family. As I was wondering what to do, I got a call from Emma.
Grandpa told me about Grandma.
Yes, but
I get it. Let me talk to Dad.
Emma seemed to understand without me having to say everything. I handed my phone to John without hesitation. John initially looked suspicious, but his expression changed to a smile when he realized it was Emma.
If Emma's asking, I guess I'll allow it.
After talking to Emma for a bit, John reluctantly gave his permission. I quickly packed and got into Emma's car when she came to pick me up, heading to my parents' house for the first time in a while.
Really? Dad makes me so mad.
Emma said that angrily while driving. I smiled wryly, but I couldn't stop worrying about my parents.
Mom, you might not want to think about this now, but you should seriously consider the future.
I nodded at her words. Even though my mother was in danger, John was only thinking about himself. I simply couldn't live with him anymore. I resolved to go through with the divorce. When we rushed to the hospital, my mother was already unconscious, and my father looked completely exhausted by her side.
Oh, Laura and Emma, you came.
Dad,
I knew this day would come eventually.
my gentle father had always been concerned about me. Seeing him so weak, I regretted not coming sooner. I'll stay here for a while. I'll be with you, Dad.
I've taken some time off work. I'll do whatever I can, Grandpa.
Thank you both.
After that, I spent my days taking care of my mom and supporting my dad. Even though I was taking care of her, she was unconscious, so all I could do was talk to her. So what I focused on was supporting my father. Then the inevitable moment came.
When are you coming back?
I got a message from John. Checking my notifications, I saw several messages. Apparently, Mary was doing the housework while I was away.
There's a family gathering coming up, so come back soon.
My mom is critically ill, so I can't go. When I replied, John called me.
Enough of this. Not only are you abandoning your duties as a wife, but now you're refusing to attend the family gathering? This is ridiculous.
I'm not joking. What is this gathering anyway? Apparently, one of his relatives was getting married. They were gathering to celebrate, but it was a relative whose name I didn't even recognize. I couldn't leave my parents to go back for someone like that. I can't. I want to stay with my parents.
No, that's an order.
With that, John hung up immediately. I sighed deeply.
Mom, Grandma.
Emma came rushing in. That day my mother passed away. Soon after, her funeral was held. Despite her chronic illness, my mother was kind and knowledgeable. She was loved by many, and not only our relatives, but also many others came to pay their respects.
Dad didn't come, did he?
No, he didn't. I had informed John about the funeral. However, he chose not to attend. As the funeral proceeded quietly, my phone rang with a call from John. Normally, I would have stepped outside to take the call, but seeing who it was, I gasped. John had specifically called me. As I was debating what to do, Emma, who was beside me, seemed to have an idea and gave me instructions.
Put it on speaker.
Hearing that, I guessed what Emma had in mind. She likely wanted to expose John's behavior to everyone present. So I deliberately answered the call on speaker in front of everyone. Hey, I'm at a funeral right now.
What are you doing? All the other relatives are gathered here.
John yelled, and I instinctively fell silent. People around me looked curiously, but when I put my finger to my lips to signal for silence, they seemed to understand, and the room fell quiet.
Today is a family gathering. Get here now and help Mom.
Don't be unreasonable. It's my mother's funeral.
Prioritize me over your mother. Get to the family gathering now.
His angry voice echoed through the quiet funeral hall. Everyone looked irritated at John's incredibly selfish remarks. Please, John, just let me say my final goodbye to my mother.
No. Get here now. If you're not here in an hour, I'll divorce you.
Divorce is something I would welcome. However, I didn't want to worry my father, who is already grieving the loss of his wife.
You hear me? 1 hour.
Wait, hold on. The call abruptly ended.
What was that?
As I held my head in frustration, my father spoke up. His body was trembling.
Has he always treated you like this?
Well,
Yes, Dad always acts high and mighty towards Mom.
Emma spoke up for me. Hearing this, my father's expression turned from anger to a stony calm.
I see. Then let's give him what he wants.
He said that coldly. An hour later, still in our funeral attire, my relatives and I arrived at John's family home.
You're late. What?
When I rang the doorbell, Mary appeared with an angry expression. However, seeing everyone gathered behind me, her body stiffened in shock. Ignoring her, we all entered John's family home. As we moved toward the noise, I saw men laughing crudely, likely drinking. Meanwhile, the women, seeing us, stepped aside in silence, their expressions surprised. Sorry to keep you waiting.
You're late. What the?
John turned around at my voice and froze. His expression was just like Mary's. The relatives, who had been lively, were surprised to see us, all dressed in suits.
What's with the outfits? And why is it not just you, Laura?
You told me to come immediately, even though it was during my mother's funeral, so here I am.
Since there was something more important than my wife's funeral, we all decided to come.
We smiled at John, but no one's eyes were smiling. Noticing this, John mumbled and looked away.
Well, that's...
All right then. Would you mind telling us why you called Laura away? What right did you have to take her away from the important moment of saying her final goodbye to her beloved mother?
Though my father was smiling, the pressure he exerted was terrifying.
Well, Laura is my wife, so...
So being a wife means you can do anything to her. Pushing all the housework and childcare onto her. Allowing your mother to harass her, and forbidding her from visiting our house. Is that what you think a wife is?
John tried to speak, but my father quickly countered. Eventually, John fell silent.
What do you think my precious Laura is to you?
My father yelled at John. John flinched and froze, letting out a small gasp.
Stop it. You're scaring John.
Mary rushed in. While she glared at my father, he returned her gaze coldly.
It's only natural for a wife to obey her husband's family.
What era do you think you're living in? Human rights are defined by law, and your statement is in direct contradiction to those laws. Are you aware of that?
My father immediately countered Mary's words. Clearly, he was extremely angry about the situation. Seeing my father's rare display of anger made me feel a bit relieved. However, I didn't show it and kept glaring at John.
Besides, if you say that, I can't come home either.
Emma said that as she stood next to my father.
You always tell me to come home once in a while, but you tell Mom she can't visit her parents. What's that about?
That's...
You should have come to Grandma's funeral, Dad. Instead, you're here drinking. I've hated that about you since I was a kid.
John looked shocked at Emma's words. He never imagined that Emma disliked him. Then my relatives started chiming in, calling him insensitive and the worst family. Even about half of John's relatives began to look at his family with disdain.
No way. Emma hates me.
John, pull yourself together.
Though Mary said that, John was already in a panic. Seeing this, we left the house. After sending my mother off peacefully, I returned to the house one more time. I needed to pack my belongings.
Are you sure you want to come with me?
Of course. I decided to divorce John and move back home. And I planned to live quietly with my father.
Laura,
Just as I finished packing, John barged in. Behind him was Mary. It seemed that Kevin was not around. He still avoided these situations, as usual. Perfect timing. Here, sign this. I handed John the completed divorce papers. Seeing them, he turned pale and began to apologize.
I need you, Laura. Please reconsider.
No, I have no love left for you.
Wait, Laura. We'll forgive you for everything. So you should forgive John too.
Something snapped inside me at Mary's words. Who do you think you are to forgive anyone?
What?
I don't need your forgiveness for anything. Mary flinched as I suddenly yelled. Ignoring her, I began to let out everything I had been holding in. Even though I repeatedly told her to call ahead, she always showed up unannounced, and I hated it. Every time she complained about my housekeeping, it made me uncomfortable. Whenever I went to Mary's house, she treated me like a maid and never gave me a break. I directed all my pent-up frustrations at John and Mary. Why on earth should I need your forgiveness?
Well,
If anything, it's you who should be asking for forgiveness. You should be saying, "I'm sorry for staying at your house for hours without notice, complaining about everything, and treating you like a maid." Mary fell silent at my words. Well, maybe it was because my father was standing next to me, glaring with a cold smile.
John, I can't leave my precious Laura in your care any longer. Get out of this house.
What?
The house is in my name, so it's you who needs to leave.
John turned pale, perhaps having forgotten this fact.
Get out now.
My father ordered John and Mary out.
Wait. Laura, please reconsider.
Wait a minute. Before you leave, just sign the divorce papers. John looked hopeful when I stopped him, but his expression quickly fell when he heard my next words. Finally accepting it, John signed the divorce papers. I'm so glad the divorce is finalized.
Yes, truly.
As my father and I shared a laugh, we heard commotion outside. We looked out the window to see what was happening.
Why did Dad leave us behind?
It seemed they had come in a car driven by Kevin. Apparently, Kevin left while they were arguing with us. After some more commotion, the police, called by our neighbors, took John and Mary away. They're noisy to the end. Watching this, I muttered. Then, after everything quieted down, I took my belongings and returned to my parents' house. Oh, it's a message from Kevin. When I checked my phone after returning home, there was a message from Kevin.
I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, Laura.
The message contained an apology. Kevin had left early to buy time for the women in John's family to escape. Apparently, some of the women had stayed behind at John's house under the guise of cleaning up. It seems that our arrival woke up the women.
So they all escaped while Kevin was buying time.
It turned out that Kevin had been marginalized in the household due to Mary's schemes. Everyone had been ignoring him. This time, Kevin had taken his revenge on Mary. I might have misunderstood Kevin.
No, it's true he didn't protect you. So don't feel sorry for him. Instead, let's be glad we're free of that family.
I nodded in agreement with my father's words. Apparently, John and Mary were in a difficult situation. Since the women had successfully escaped, their husbands were now holding a grudge against John and Mary. And Kevin himself divorced Mary. The two of them were shunned by all the relatives, and Kevin kicked them out of the house, forcing them to move into a cheap apartment. It's going to be tough for them from now on.
What did you do to Dad?
I had taken a significant portion of John's savings through property division and compensation for emotional abuse. Additionally, I had informed his company about his behavior. John would occasionally bring his colleagues to the house. John had old-fashioned views in the worst way. As a result, he would sometimes forcibly bring his subordinates to the house. One of these subordinates had given me their contact information in case I ever needed help, and I enlisted their help this time. As a result, John was in a very uncomfortable position at work. And that's not all.
What else?
It turned out John had been emotionally abusing his subordinates as well. When they learned about our divorce, they came forward with evidence and sued him.
Wow, that's really the worst.
Yes, and he ended up getting fired and had to pay compensation to his subordinates. So, John had no choice but to move into a cheap apartment. Now, he's working multiple part-time jobs, barely making ends meet. Mary could work too, but since she's always been a homemaker, she's just living off John's earnings. Because of this, John is under a lot of stress. According to a subordinate who saw him in town, he looked haggard and frustrated, kicked a trash can, and was severely reprimanded by the police.
He really hit rock bottom. I'm so glad we cut ties before this baby was born.
Emma was at my parents' house to announce her pregnancy. Seeing her lovingly pat her belly, I was also glad to have finalized the divorce. Emma's husband was also there, currently keeping my father company.
So, can I have the baby here?
Of course. I'm already looking forward to the birth of my grandchild. Knowing that a great-grandchild is on the way, my father eagerly brought out drinks and started drinking with Emma's husband, though I'll need to stop him soon before he overdoes it. John and Mary, with their selfish actions, won't even get to see their grandchild and great-grandchild respectively, let alone hold it. I think that's the biggest punishment for John, who doted on Emma. By the way, I informed Kevin about Emma's pregnancy.
I don't deserve to meet them. Please focus on taking care of Emma.
Given Kevin's words, I doubt we'll see him.
By the way, Mom, have you thought about marrying again?
Not yet. I just got divorced after all. As I answered Emma, one man came to mind. His name is James. He's the subordinate who gave me his contact information, and he's been contacting me frequently since my divorce.
That look on your face. Do you have someone in mind?
Emma asked with a mischievous smile. She managed to get the whole story out of me.
James, I think I know him.
What?
Sometimes, when I woke up in the middle of the night, he'd apologize and say, "Sorry for waking you up."
Emma looked nostalgic. Apparently, whenever James came over, he was always considerate of Emma, who was just a child at the time. And he always seemed to be watching over me.
I used to wish James was my dad instead.
Really?
I think it's time for you to find your own happiness, Mom.
Her words made me pause and think, and then I nodded. Right after that, James invited me to dinner, and Emma and I shared a laugh. My own happiness, maybe I can find it this time. Thinking that, I couldn't help but smile. A little early, aren't I? A year later, I arrived early for a meeting and wondered how to pass the time.
Laura,
What? I turned around at the voice to see a disheveled John. He stumbled towards me.
it's been really tough since then. I realize now how important you are to me.
I see. I replied coldly, keeping my distance from John.
And I heard that Emma had a baby.
Hearing that, I felt a surge of anger, wondering how the news had leaked. Emma is currently busy taking care of her newborn. I can't let John disrupt her life. So what? It has nothing to do with you.
Yes, it does. If you and I get back together.
That's out of the question.
At that moment, someone put an arm around my shoulder. Looking up, I saw James glaring at John.
You, James? My subordinate?
Not anymore. I'm your former subordinate, and I'm now in a serious relationship with Laura.
John's face fell in despair at James' words. A year ago, when James invited me to dinner, I accepted, and we met. He confessed that he had fallen in love with me at first sight and had been harboring feelings for me ever since. After that, we decided to start dating.
This can't be.
I will make Laura happy this time, and I will cherish Emma's child as my own grandchild. You no longer have a place here.
With James' firm declaration, John stumbled away. He would never appear in front of me again.
So, Laura,
Yes,
will you marry me?
James asked, looking a bit shy. I nodded, feeling a bit shy myself. So we're engaged now.
Wow, congratulations.
That's wonderful. It has always been my and my wife's wish for Laura to be happy.
When I reported the news at home, my father and Emma congratulated us. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I thanked them.
Are you going to have a wedding?
No, we're both a bit too old for that. Besides, you can't participate with a baby, and it would be hard on you, Dad. They looked a bit disappointed. I smiled softly at that. Instead, we're planning a trip. We'll be away for a while.
I see. Leave Grandpa to me.
Then, I guess I'll take care of the great-grandchild.
Smiling, I nodded at the two of them. I looked at Emma and my father. Thanks to you both, I'm very happy now. Thank you so much. At my words, the two of them exchanged glances. My father was the first to speak.
On the contrary, it's because of you that your mother and I were happy.
Same here. I'm who I am today because you raised me with so much love.
I expressed my gratitude to them once more. Shortly after, I married James.
It's like a dream having Laura as my wife.
James's expression reminded me of John's when he confessed his love. But James was different. John always looked straight ahead, never at me. In contrast, James looked right into my eyes. Even such small things made me smile. A few years later, my father joined my mother, and now I live peacefully with James. Unlike with John, we talk about everything and respect each other. It's a feeling I cherish deeply.
Is Emma coming today?
Yes, she is. Her child is already 6.
Time flies. I always want to buy her everything when she calls me Grandpa.
I couldn't help but laugh at James's words. I understood the feeling well, because I feel the same way. I think Emma might scold you if you buy too much.
And you're any different?
As we laughed together, we heard cheerful voices from the entrance. Smiling, we headed over.
Mom, Dad, hi.
Emma greeted us with a smile. Moments later, our 6-year-old grandchild jumped into James's arms, making him stagger.
Oh, such a little tomboy.
She takes after you. Emma let out a dissatisfied sound at my words. When I burst out laughing, everyone else did too. I thought to myself that I wanted to protect these smiles forever.